Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another Ask an OpenShift Admin. I am Chris Short, host of the most of Red Hat live streaming. I am joined by the one and only Andrew Sullivan, as well as some other Red Hatters who
Yes, sir.
may or may not be visible right now.
Yeah.
So feel free to ask us questions about anything OpenShift related, right? Or Red Hat related for that matter. We can get you the right answers. Feel free to email me short@redhat.com if you have questions that you don't feel like you want to ask on air. That's fine too. But Andrew, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hour. So as Chris alluded to, this is one of our Office Hour series of live streams here on OpenShift TV, or Red Hat live streaming, I should say. Eventually I'll get that right. So the intention here is much like if you ever had a manager or a professor, a teacher who had office hours where you can come in and ask about whatever it is that you want to ask about. That's what we're here for. So anything that is top of mind for you, anything that you want to ask us about, whatever it happens to be, regardless of today's subject, you are more than welcome to ask us in chat, in social media. So you can reach me at Practical Andrew on Twitter, all one word. And Chris is at Chris Short on Twitter. And of course, you can reach out via email, although we usually don't respond to email while we're on stream because too much multitasking is hard.
Many inputs, yeah.
So yeah, feel free, regardless of which platform you're watching us on, whether it's one of the YouTube channels or Twitch. If you chat with us, it gets rebroadcast across all of them, and we'll see it, and we'll do our best to respond. So today, as Chris mentioned, we're here to talk about Kubernetes API deprecations. Thank you for posting that link, Chris.
You got it, no problem.
So this is an interesting one, and we've talked about it in bits and pieces over the last, month or so. We've brought this up and talked about a couple of different aspects. I think the first time I mentioned this was in the What's New in 4.8, when we talked about the API request counts.
Yes.
API.
Yeah.
So this is kind of an extension of that. And as we get closer to 4.9, this is going to get more important and more relevant. So we wanted to bring on the subject matter experts, the folks who know far more than I could ever hope to about this. And of course, that starts with Rob. So Rob, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hey everyone, happy to be here. I'm Rob Szumski. I'm on the product management team for OpenShift. Been in the Kube space for quite a long time. I deal with a lot of things being built on top of Kube APIs, and so API deprecation is part of that. But talked to a bunch of folks in like the operator community and other folks building on top of the OpenShift platform. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, Rob, I'm surprised this is the first time we've had you on the stream because like you came from CoreOS, you have a long history. I say came from, you were brought over with CoreOS, so you have a long history here, and it's always fun to chat with you about that.
Yeah, I've been in the Kube space kind of since it existed, so
yeah,
it's fun ride.
Yeah.
So we are also joined by, and I will apologize in advance because I'm terrible with names, Kamilla
Macedo.
Yes, perfect. You spoke perfect. I'm software engineer. I have been working with the operator framework for a while. I believe a little bit more than 2 years, and I'm happy to be here and help you if I can.
And last but certainly not least is Frederick.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So I'm Frederick. I'm part of the OpenShift engineering team with Kamilla. I've been at Red Hat for 7 years and a bit more than 20 years in IT.
Thank you. And you know it's a serious topic when we bring on both product management and engineering. Like that means that Chris and I are way out of our depth and we need help.
Quite out of our depths, but working our way there.
So I don't want to waste too much time. It's an important topic. I want to make sure that Rob and Kamilla and Frederick have plenty of time to talk about it as well as answer any of your questions. So I want to go ahead and get right to our top of mind topics for this particular week. So for those who have watched the stream before, and particularly for those who have watched for a long time, thank you. You know that we have this kind of reoccurring segment, if you will, which is things that Chris and I have found that are important or relevant that have happened in usually the last weekish or so. But they bubble up, and I think that they're important for you all, for our audience to be aware of. So the first one, which is a little bit self-serving, is there will be no stream next week. So
Yes.
I think, and Chris, maybe you know, I don't know how many streams are happening next week, but next week is Ansible Fest, and
Yeah.
I have the privilege of being one of the subject matter experts. So if you're registered for Ansible Fest, if you go to the Connect tab, there is a brain date thing, and you can go and register for brain date. I'm going to call them appointments, not to make it awkward.
Brain date.
Yeah.
That's
Have you not heard of brain
name.
date?
No, I've not. That's an
Yeah.
interesting service name.
So yeah, essentially you can go and schedule one-on-one or group appointments with other folks. So the first time I heard about it was back in, I want to say KubeCon in like Austin in 2017, or maybe it was.
That was my first KubeCon. Yeah.
What was then OpenStack Summit, maybe. One of the events in Austin was when I first heard about it. But so yeah, if you're attending Ansible Fest, by all means, go and check that out. There's more than just me, of course. There's a lot of folks.
Right.
So yeah, not just me. You get enough of me. Maybe talk to somebody else.
Yeah. So they're actually streaming a lot of the Ansible Fest stuff this year on the Red Hat channel. So just stay tuned for that. But yes, we'll have an augmented schedule next week on the 29th and 30th as a result of Ansible Fest. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Indeed. And I think all of that is on the streaming calendar as well. And
it should be, yes.
I'm going to trust that you've posted a link and to all that stuff if folks don't already know how to get there. So the next one that I want to talk about is another one that we've been talking about for quite a while, which is the stable upgrade edge for OpenShift 4.7 to 4.8. So we've gotten a number of questions about this, both internally and externally. Thank you to everybody who has sent in messages. And we are now, as of, I want to say Monday, maybe Tuesday at the latest, we now have a stable upgrade edge from 4.7 to 4.8.11, I believe is 4.8.11. So congratulations, we made it, we got there. Engineering
we fixed a virtual hardware thing.
Yeah. So it's funny, right? It felt like, and I don't know why, this one felt like it took longer to go from, GA release, hey, you can release, to there's a stable upgrade edge. But engineering actually sent out a really interesting email where they were highlighting that with this new process, which we've been using since 4.6, this upgrade edge was right in line with the others. So the upgrade promotion happened 55 days after GA and included over 120 bugs since that GA, right? Including, I think, 5 of those were upgrade blockers. So 4.6 was promoted to stable after 58 days, and 4.7 was promoted to stable after 50 days. So this is right in line. Like, it seemed like a long time, at least to me. I felt like I was constantly, hearing about and people were, asking regularly about when it'll be available. But really, the system is working. It's working the way we want it to and the way that we intend it to, so that, when you use stable, which is something like 90% of clusters use the stable upgrade channel. When you use stable, you can be confident that you're not going to encounter any edge cases or anything like that.
I'll throw in a plug for please, if you've got a cluster that you can add on the fast channel, it really helps us out. We did find a few blogs that we did want to block upgrade edges, and it's not that the whole platform has an issue, but like in very specific combinations, something needed to be blocked there, and so we did it to protect you. So trust your cluster console or any of the tools we have to visualize that graph, because when they say it's okay, it's okay. But then, we need folks to mix in some of their development environments, their test environments. If you got like a scale testing kind of environment, throw your cluster on there and get us a little bit of feedback on that. It really, really helps.
Yeah, and I'll also add that fast updates, right? If you're using the fast channel, it is fully supported. You can absolutely call, you can open a support case, you can help with anything that happens inside of there. It's only the candidate channels that are not supported.
Got it. That's good. I've forgotten that over the years, I feel like.
So Ashish, how to take storage at cluster level. Do you mind, Ashish, if you can
elaborate?
Clarify? On that. So I'm going to share my screen real quick here. Nope, that's show notes. That's a cluster. That's the one I want. So what I want to show here is, so late last week, the Kubernetes team announced a couple of CVEs. So I saw these over in the Kubernetes Slack. If you happen to be a member there, check the announcements channel. You'll see that shows up. So the first one is this 2020-8561. So this one, it is a flaw where, if I'm remembering correctly, essentially using the validated webhook configuration and logging above a certain level, it can expose certain information. So if you look at this guy, you can see that OpenShift 4 is not affected. So essentially, congratulations, we don't have to do anything. And that is a result of, as you can see here, we don't support logging levels higher than 8, and the vulnerability only affects when you have logging levels set to 10 or higher. So the second one that I wanted to touch on, and this is the one that I've heard more about, is this 2021-25-741. So this one, and let me check to make sure that you're posting the links.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this one does affect OpenShift 4. You'll notice that we don't have an errata or a release date here. So this is being worked in the background. Once that becomes available, we will make sure to make it, out through the standard update mechanism for all affected versions. One thing that I would highly recommend is somewhere on this page, there is a follow button, I thought. It might not be there because I'm not logged in.
Maybe.
But you can, I believe that there is, if you're logged in, you can click the follow button and it will send you emails when this page is updated, including when this errata happens. You can also go over to the Bugzilla that's associated with it, and you can follow the BZ. And that will let you know when there happens to be any updates or changes inside of there. So definitely this one is a pretty serious one. Definitely keep an eye on that one and make sure that you are updating your clusters as appropriate. The CVE does note that it is, I don't know, it's not fully mitigated, but it is maybe less affecting because we use SELinux. So we've had this conversation before. SELinux fixes, or it doesn't fix, it stops a lot of things that affect other platforms. So.
And is it true that we're the only major kube distro with SELinux enforcing out of the box? I think that's true.
I think that's true.
I think so. I think there are some others that use AppArmor, but I know dramatically less about AppArmor than I do SELinux, naturally.
Right. I mean, to my knowledge, yes.
So anyways, we put a lot of hard work into that, so I'm glad it pays off, in situations like this.
Yeah, and that in... Well, that in combination with things like no root, we force no root containers. We SECs and all the other security mechanisms that we have. Where's that security ebook? I always like to post that one.
Oh yeah,
I should have had that link handy.
Shoot, I should have that as a short command. Duh.
So while you're digging on that, the last thing that I'll touch on here is. So last week we had Christian on. Christian talked about Windows hosts, bring your own Windows nodes to OpenShift. And he alluded to it would be released as generally available soon. And sure enough, Monday it was released as generally available. So if you have any need for Windows nodes and you did not or you are not using one of those previous platforms, specifically on-prem, it was limited to vSphere IPI. Now you can bring those with any UPI deployment. There's a couple of blogs here. So this one is from Anand. Also, Christian has one. Be sure to read through these. Be sure to read through the docs. Watch the stream from last week. Christian walks through all the prerequisites, any kind of other gotchas and other stuff that you may need to be aware of. But yeah, Windows nodes, Windows containers, go forth and do great things.
And I just dropped the link to the security guide. Is that the book you were talking about?
Yep.
The
Thank you.
ebook deal? Okay, cool. Just making sure. And we also have a lot of other ebooks, folks, especially about operators, which Rob mentioned. So feel free to grab those if you need some reading material, as always.
So I see LSI. Is it possible to deploy 2 OpenShift clusters on the same domain? So yes, the base domain is okay to be the same, but remember the full DNS name that it uses includes the cluster name. So you can have cluster1.basedomain.tld, cluster2.basedomain.tld. I don't think you can have, like, you can't have 2 clusters that use the same cluster name, or if you and it sounds like you're saying here, like, can I change the route to use oauth.openshift.basedomain or api-int.basedomain? I don't think you can do that with 2 clusters, simply because it needs some way to figure out which one to route to.
We do have the ability, you can change some of the host names that we use as a day 2 solution, but they still need to be unique just so the routing works.
Yeah, I mean, here's the response. The subdomain is the last option. My apps need to be exposed on the base domain, not on the subdomain. So the wildcard cert will be an issue. Well, you can still do that, can't you, with like a DNSC name?
I wonder if you could use an apps domain.
Oh, that too.
Because so the apps domain, and I just stopped sharing my screen. Let me bring that back. So let's go to the docs.
Docs.
Dun, 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 dun. No. So we want apps domain. So the apps domain is, you can tell I go to this docs fairly frequently. So it says for AWS, it actually works and is supported on any deployment type. But effectively what this does is when you create a route, it uses whatever this apps domain is for all of those routes. And that domain endpoint, so this apps.acme.io, that DNS endpoint can be located on an external load balancer or wherever it happens to be. So that could be one option. Where that would get weird is that external load balancer would still need to understand, like, app1.apps.acme.io needs to go to cluster 1, app2 needs to go to cluster 2, right? And so on and so forth. So the best option in that instance, now I'm wondering if it isn't to use a ingress controller from one of our partners. So think like an F5 or a Citrix ADC, where it's able to reach out and control, right? The operator and the integration is able to reach out and control that external device. That may be the most robust option that you have. So I'm catching up on chat here.
Drop that link real quick.
Yeah, I'll put the link to this apps domain inside there. The apps domain, usually this comes up in the context of with on-prem API when folks want to use or want to move the apps, star.apps endpoint off of the virtual IP, the VIP that's managed by the cluster, and onto an external load balancer. This is one of the ways that you can do that.
Awesome.
Without changing significant things inside of the cluster.
That's a very good point.
All right, I will stop my sharing again, and I will. That's all I've got, I think. I don't see anything else in my notes here. So yeah, let's talk about API deprecations. So Rob, we chatted about this beforehand. I think you've got some slides that kind of talk at a high level of, why this is important, why it matters to us, and what it affects. So I definitely want to make sure that we address that because I will admit, this is the Ask an Admin, live stream, and we're talking about APIs, which not everybody, some people are like, what? That's, APIs are developer things. Well, no, this is important for all of us, and that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I do have a few slides. I promise they're mostly just to show you some commands that are hard to describe verbally and some screenshots. So we're mostly just going to be talking. So I hope I didn't scare you away already. So yeah, let's jump into it. So basically, in Kube, they have an API deprecation policy, and they're actually very generous about this. So
very generous.
Like some of the APIs that we're going to talk about today, I'm not going to list them all out because there's a ton, but there's a good link for them. Have been like deprecated since like Kube 1.6, Like we're talking about 1.22 here, 1.6, like
Yeah.
years ago. So you shouldn't be using these things anyways. But some of them are a little bit newer. And so they're finally removing a ton of these in 1.22. And so that's why we're talking about this today. This also corresponds with OpenShift 4.9, which will contain Kubernetes 1.22. And so you can kind of use those interchangeably, as I will today. So let's talk about a few of the popular ones that are getting deprecated. And what deprecated means is when you submit objects in the old format, the deprecated format, they will either just straight up not work, and your CLI or whatever tool you're using will just say, I don't know what that is. Or in some cases, we can actually do an upgrade to the actual, like transform it to the actual API, the real one, like if it went from beta to stable.
Right.
So sometimes that can happen.
So like, I want to drive that point home very hard, right? Like deprecation can mean it's gone from a beta state to a GA state, right? That just means you basically just have to change one line to use the new API. That's it, right? Sometimes that's as easy as that. Other times there's an actual change afoot, like in the example of pod security policies. There's a new thing in place for pod security policies. Like Docker shim, right? Like it's not a problem that it's being deprecated because you have 4 or 2 more releases now, I think, before you have to actually get off of it. So that deprecation process takes some time, and once it's done, they usually say 4 releases, but sometimes that's not the case. It's longer. Once it's deprecated, though, and you stop seeing warnings, that's when you know you need to have your stuff up to snuff. So make sure you check out those notes. And specifically for us, we're talking about operators today, right?
Yeah, so I was going to cover, there's kind of a few different audiences that need to care about this per Andrew's comment earlier. So I want to talk about operators because it's content producers. If you produce a Helm chart or an operator, or you've got a tutorial online or whatever that's using outdated resource YAMLs, you need to update that or it's not going to work. So there's that side of it. And so we've got a very rich operator ecosystem, work with a ton of partners building some really cool stuff, running databases, machine learning workloads, all that stuff on top of Kube. And so if under the hood they're using one of these, they need to update to not use it. And again, this should have happened over many months and releases, because this has been planned for a while. The main one that you need to care about, especially in operator land, is the custom resource definition, which has been kind of a V1 or a stable API for a while now. And so they're finally removing the beta version of that. And Chris, as you mentioned, so the spec of this thing did not change. We basically said, hey, the beta one is good. Let's roll it on up and make it official. So all you need to do is just change, like basically get rid of V1 beta 1 on that. Some of the other ones are a little bit more invasive because some of the spec actually did change, like either a field name went from not required to required, or changed names and that kind of thing. So some of them are a little bit more. I listed only 4 of them here. There's actually, if you, there's a link, I think, that we have in the show notes for the full list on the Kube site upstream. But these are the main ones that I think folks are probably using out there in the wild. Validating and mutating webhooks are useful for admission controllers, and we actually use them in the operator ecosystem to put, mostly we manage the TLS on these so that you can expose some metrics and other things. And so that's where those get a little bit more widely used in our tools. And then certificate signing requests for folks that have built automation around some of the cert management in Kube. OpenShift kind of does this for you by default. And you don't really have to mess with it too much. But if you do want to, start monkeying around with the CAs and do some things, which a lot of enterprises do, that API is changing as well.
So, Rob, can I ask a primitive question?
Ooh.
So you mentioned before, like the APIs are versions. So there's V1 Alpha 1, V1 Beta 1, Beta 2, Beta 3, and so on and so forth. What does that actually mean? And generally, do I need to pay attention to those?
So I think the first lesson is, yes, you do, because of situations like this. But for the most part, that's just an indicator of like if I'm going to be building something against this, how on top of it do I have to be? If you're building against like an alpha API, it could mean that that never progresses, and like you're building on something that might just immediately be removed, or like everyone will stop working on it and will pursue a different. So I think that there's like the maturity aspect of that. But then technically, when you were writing against one of those things, you were fulfilling the exact spec that that API provides. And so you probably, if you want to take on a new feature in Kube that is in a newer version of that API, you have to update it and update all your code to do that. So you as an end user, it's pretty easy if you've got like a GitOps repo and you just got your YAMLs in there to just do a regex or whatever and change stuff and you're good. Where it gets harder is us on providing the platform side. We do a bunch of upgrades and manage, deprecating and enabling these new APIs on your behalf. So if you're just using OpenShift, you're good to go. Now, if you're a content producer and you maybe say you support 100 or 1,000 customers that are using an alpha API, you got to have a plan there for how to get that from alpha to beta, in an automated fashion, unless you want to like really disrupt your customers. So that's where you need to pay attention to that.
So I think most people hear alpha beta and they think, early
Unusable.
stage,
Right.
or unstable is probably appropriate. It means that there can be changes, significant changes to that API endpoint. But I also think a lot of folks think unsupported. So is there, like, if I'm using an alpha API for something in OpenShift, does that mean that I'm doing something that's unsupported?
It kind of depends. We have a few situations where changing around some of the APIs is really invasive. And so we do fully support an alpha API, but when we get those from upstream, we typically would follow a typical alpha beta stable and not support the alphas. We actually usually don't enable a lot of the upstream APIs until they hit beta. So you usually won't find one of those in an OpenShift cluster, unless you've specifically toggled on like a feature flag or something like that.
Got it. Okay, I'll stop distracting you now.
It's all good. So that was kind of the overview. I've got a few kind of like commands and screenshots. So we talked about content producers, but there's also just admins that are running clusters. And you probably just want to check to see, hey, my users on this cluster, what have they installed? What are they actually doing? So if you produce an operator and you maybe even use our operator SDK, so the easiest thing is to start grepping for some of the APIs that you might be using, and just go check their versions. So like API extensions, V1 beta 1, this is the old CRD API that's being deprecated. You can also check for any of this and more with our operator SDK CLI. You can validate what we call a bundle, which is a bunch of the metadata about the APIs you use, and say, hey, validate this against Kube 122. And it will go, give you some output for things that you're either using or not using, and what you need to do there. We've got a bunch of cooler tools for live cluster usage. So think operators is more about cluster content, right? It's like other parties producing stuff that you're probably just using. But what about live stuff? I've got somebody that's got some Jenkins job that's using the Kube API or something like that. So in OpenShift, we have two different things you can do. First, we have an alert that fires when you're using an API that we have marked as deprecated, and then that will continue kind of firing and increasing severity as you get from like OpenShift 4.6 to 4.7 to 4.8, for example. If 4.8 is when it's going to get removed. And here's some screenshots of just what that looks like. And so in the message, you'll see that the group version and resource that's being used is the actual object, and so we output that. So on the right hand side, a few days ago, I grabbed this screenshot of a live cluster, and it's using the mutating webhook config API that is being deprecated because it's a V1 beta 1, not the stable version of that. And so you can go see exactly how many of those are firing for all the different APIs. So that's a really cool thing that we've got, and we can go poke around on a live cluster here in a second. Then the next thing you can do is actually use this object called the API request count. So we've got, this is kind of a custom API that OpenShift has to track other APIs. And so what you can do is go look at specifically one of these and go see which release it's being removed in, and then what is the actual usage. And I kind of put the table version here, but we can go look at the live one, and it'll show you by service account who's actually using this thing. So you can go yell at this team or that team for not updating their code to use one of these new things.
That's something I'm interested in, because we've shown this OCI Git or OC Git API request count before, but I was never sure if we could see like what actually is using those APIs. So that's something that's interesting to me.
And the fact that it lists out what's removed and which release, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, trying to make this really easy for this to kind of be self-service too. So, you as an admin maybe will say, hey, this is I just provide like a multi-tenant cluster. This is my tenants problems. Okay, great. Well, they've got a self-service API to go figure out what's happening. And you can also use that same API to really get after somebody if you've given them a lot of time to migrate.
So I have a question there of, let's say that I have an application team that's using, I don't know, pet sets, right? I think pet sets was actually removed back in like Kubernetes 1.4 or something, 1.5. So let's say they're using something that we know is going away. Can I, if I update the cluster, will that break them? Or do we prevent a cluster upgrade if that API is in use?
Yeah, great question. So yes, in OpenShift we do. In upstream Kubernetes, there's not a facility for this. So specifically, especially in our operator ecosystem, OpenShift will notice that, hey, you're using an operator that maybe is just not even present. The partner has marked that it isn't available in the next version of OpenShift yet. And so we can say, hey, you probably don't want to upgrade because you probably care about what that operator is doing. Or the API has changed between this operator versus that one. There might be a change required there, or you need to upgrade the operator before you go to the new version. Usually like our operator authors will write things so that they work across like OpenShift 4.7, 4.8, and 4.9. And so then you can upgrade to the new version on 4.8 before you then jump to 4.9, that type of thing. But we've got kind of warnings and like walkthroughs for all of this.
And I may be getting ahead of us here, but is there any mechanism that will kind of not just detect that API is in use, but automatically kind of update the object or redirect to the correct API?
Yeah, so you actually see us do this. Well, you probably don't see us do this because it happens transparently in OpenShift. We will do automatic kind of mutation of older objects into newer formats, just as a kind of service that you get for free. And so I forget. I think I've been using a single deployment YAML for my personal website on a kube cluster for like a really long time, and I wrote it like literally like 5 years ago, and never updated it. And finally, it stopped working when I made a change and wanted to redeploy it. And OpenShift, I think it was like either the alpha or maybe the beta of the deployment object itself, and it was like, I don't know what this is anymore. But what's cool is my website kept running because OpenShift had automatically dragged that thing forward through all the API changes because it had that logic built into it. So I needed to update my YAML before I could apply it again, but like it never stopped running, and because OpenShift carried it forward, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. I thought you said you might have something to share, so I'll let you. Demo. I don't know if you want to switch that. I see that there's a question. So Ashish clarified, looking for or asking about backup strategies. So I'm going to paraphrase here of, I have a cluster and I want to back up the entire cluster and then restore when needed.
So that's a big question.
Yeah.
I dropped some links about, the cluster itself backing up etcd and about disaster recovery, but there's a lot of moving pieces there. And I knew you would touch on this, Andrew, so let's go.
Yeah, and so I want to highlight that we also talked about this in one of our streams. I'm gonna try and find which one that was. It was relatively recent. Anyways, so we talked about it in more depth in one of the recent streams. Chris will find the link for that and post it in there. So I want to highlight a couple of things. So an etcd backup it includes everything that is an etcd. So what's an etcd? It is the state, the expected state and the desired state of the entire cluster. And that includes not just things like, hey, I need this deployment to be created and it needs to have 3 replicas, and it needs, I need this service. It also includes things like, I expect there to be a node named, XYZ, and I expect it to have this type of configuration. So where this gets weird and risky is, let's say that disaster truly happens, right? And all I'm left with is an etcd backup. If I create a whole new cluster and then replace that etcd database, it's going to think it's the old cluster at that point. And it's going to go through this chaos that may or may not be successful to try and make the new cluster look like the old cluster, when what you really want is to redeploy all of your applications inside of there.
Right.
So you don't necessarily want a whole etcd backup. You just want a backup of the objects that are relevant to your application. So oftentimes this is why, like, during that stream, you probably, if you listen to it, you'll hear me say, like, etcd is not backups are not a disaster recovery, strategy.
Right. That's why I posted the 2 links.
Yeah. And when we had, who was it? I think it was Anand on, when we had a stream dedicated to etcd. When we talked to Anand, his thing is, and I talked to one of the support people as well, etcd backups are great when you lose a control plane node or 2 or 3. But the rest of the cluster is still there.
Yeah.
So that you can bring back that control plane with a minimal amount of fuss. So etcd backups, not the greatest strategy in all scenarios, but are a possibility in some scenarios. Just be cognizant of that. So what's the real answer here? So there's a number of partners that have capabilities here. I want to say Trilio comes to mind. Veeam. There's a handful of others you can look on the catalog or on the marketplace to find all of those. Another option is something like Valero, where you can go in and you can use Valero to back up those objects. And one that's, and Rob, I'd be curious your perception here as the PM who is managing the PM cluster, or kind of is the face of managing the PM cluster, GitOps. GitOps is, like, it forces you to document and use, like, this state of my cluster in a very I'm going to say heavy-handed. Christian's probably grimacing, but it forces you to do that, so that if something happens to your primary cluster, great, deploy a new one wherever it happens to be at, and then just tell the GitOps operator, hey, deploy this application, deploy this stuff, make it available in the new cluster.
Exactly.
Yeah, GitOps is great for that. It's something that we do use on this cluster, where a bunch of our product managers all share this same thing. And so if you want to onboard an app, you go through Git, you make a pull request and all that. So we use OpenShift GitOps and Argo CD to make that happen. But yeah, it's perfect for, especially, go deploy this on 5 clusters, or like, I want to give this to somebody to run on their local Kubernetes and Docker or something like that. Like, here's all the manifests, If that source is in etcd and etcd is gone, that's not a great position to be in.
Yeah. So Ashish was asking if the team can email us. Yes, feel free. short@redhat.com. And then Andrew, I don't know, I forget what.
Yeah, I just typed mine in there. First name dot last name for me.
Yep. Cool.
Should we poke around on some?
Please do.
Yeah.
All right. So first thing I thought we could look at is that custom resource for the API request count. And so I'm just going to search for that really quick. So you can see it shows up here. One cool thing about this is you can see every instance of basically every API that you have on here. And so I've got some operators installed, so we've got tons and tons and tons of these things. But let's go just like search for, like, let's say pods, right? Let's go find just like the V1 pods API, which is right here, because we should have some decent amount of usage of this. So if you go over to the YAML section here, you can start seeing, like, by hour, by node, by user, by verb. It looks like our Prometheus that we use for OpenShift monitoring is doing 400 some watches, which makes sense. It's looking at all the state and the scrape targets and all that stuff. So, that makes sense. And you can keep on going down and down and down. We can see here, this one is actually a kubelet is doing something here. So you can see that it's doing a number of different deletes, gets, like, it needs to run the pods and delete the pods and all that. So that makes a ton of sense as well. And just keep going on and on and on. So that's how this is useful, even if you just are just trying to see who's using one of your APIs for any reason. This is not like necessarily like an auditing mechanism. Like I think you could maybe use it for that, but like the audit log is going to be a better thing for that. So let's go back here and we'll look at, I'm trying to think. So we've got Webhooks is one of our APIs. So you can see here that we've got the V1 and then we've got the V1 beta 1. So this is the one that's deprecated. This is the one that's in use. And so we can go see how much this one is being used here. So it looks like not a lot of usage on this one, actually. So you can see some of these nodes are not doing any usage. So, but we've just got them listed out here. And so, great, we're not using this one. It's going to be removed in 122, and our request count is 0. So, you know, that's perfect. We're in a golden spot here. And so you can go check kind of each one of these things. Let's go see maybe if we've got our certificate signing requests, maybe. We got a lot of these. It's not the cert manager one. I don't remember. I think it's this. Well, that's the V1. So it's probably this one. So okay, so we got a few of these. So Kube State Metrics is doing some watches and did one list of this. And so what's interesting about this is this will get picked up since this is a part, Kube State Metrics is a part of OpenShift. This will get picked up when you upgrade from 4.8 to 4.9 is we'll upgrade this one for you. So that one is not to worry about, but if it was anything non-OpenShift in here, then you really start to care about that. So it looks like we're covered on this one as well. So that's kind of how you can use this object to start hunting down some stuff.
And if we have, so of course, application teams, right? A developer can create an object that's using one of these. What about like non-Red Hat operators, maybe partner operators or operators that you've made yourself? I assume that, let's say it's a partner, you would want to contact the partner and basically, hey, we're seeing that you're continuing to use this API. We know it's going to be gone in 1.22. Have you fixed that yet? Like, right. Is that the proper course of action?
Yeah, because it might be, we actually have a pre-release version of that out if you'd like to test it or whatever. Like, because one of the interesting things about, we're kind of talking about OpenShift here, but this is just a Kubernetes problem. So if you have a partner that supports all kinds of kubes, they all have to deal with this. OpenShift happens to ship Kubernetes releases on a pretty consistent basis. Basically, one release after they come out upstream. So, roughly about a quarter later. And so we usually see this first before other folks. And so it might be partners hearing this for the first time, possibly because of OpenShift users, but then it's going to be other managed service users once, pick your next favorite distro that updates, then all these requests start flooding in. So it does help to engage your partner and maybe even help them test out they're already working on. And many of them have already upgraded. It's like we said, these changes have been in the works forever.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight what you said there at the beginning, which is this isn't an OpenShift thing. This is a Kubernetes thing. So this is affecting everyone. It just so happens that we're making a big deal out of it, quote unquote, because we are relatively early compared to many distros with the 1.22 adoption. I also had a random thought of like, if before releases were quarterly, when we move to 3 releases, does that make them like trimesters?
I guess. I don't know.
What's the terminology there?
3 a year. I mean, you could say trimesters, but
my wife isn't home right now, but she probably just gave me a dirty look.
Yeah. It's not as enduring as the normal use of trimesters, I feel like.
No.
The last thing I want to show is one of those alerts. If we can go see, so you can see I've got a bunch of instances of this firing 1, 2, 3, 4 because we're using some APIs that are being removed. And so for each instance of this that's firing, you can actually go look at some of the information about what exactly it is. And then if that usage did tail off because oh, hey, I'm going to do a deploy tomorrow morning that's going to fix this, you could see it drop off at 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. As that specific API stops being used. This one specifically is the V1 beta 1 of the Ingress API.
I'm going to take a brief moment to point out, because I always remember this only when I see it in your cluster there. You have that big purple banner about it's being fully GitOps driven. One of the upcoming streams that we have, and it keeps getting bumped out for various reasons, is around customizing the console and the stuff that you see here. So we'll be talking about that in the not too distant future.
Yeah, so that's a console customization that again is run through the actual GitOps pipeline that it's even telling you about. So you can customize it with a YAML object. And so one of the things that when new PMs want to get familiar with the process, we say, hey, go change the color of that banner. It used to be blue, now it's purple. Somebody else might make it green, and that's a way for you to see how the process works. And 30 seconds later, banner's different. So very cool.
So our Hope 9 asks, are there needs to have, and now my chat just scrolled.
Are there a need to have special processes for the EUS releases, as they could possibly hit a lot more deprecations once they get out of their 18-month hiatus? I mean, that's a very good point.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
So it's probably not like a special or a different process. It's just that you're like compressing a bunch of changes into like one like big event, because you're going to go probably from one EUS to another EUS, and EUS stands for the extended update support. So this is just a longer period of support than we typically support a release, and that's to give folks more predictability. So we've got customers that might deploy OpenShift on like a cruise ship that doesn't come to port for but every year or something like that, where they actually want to change
done.
When they want to change software. And so this is perfect for that use case, but many other things too. You've got a factory that's really important that can only come down at very predictable times, like you have a shutdown over the holidays or something like that. Basically what you're doing is these alerts specifically actually mention the EUS so that you can get a heads up on planning for this as part of that EUS upgrade, because probably what you're going to do is you're going to upgrade OpenShift, but you're also going to upgrade all the software that's running on top. That's the actual, good stuff that meets your business goals. Mm-hmm. So in the case of like that cruise ship, you might have some like the apps where you order your food and like all that. New versions of that need to update these APIs if they're using them. And if you've got vendor software that also comes on top, you need to make sure that vendor has also updated their software. And so these alerts just help you try to get on that kind of spectrum of thinking, because most folks, when they do an EUS upgrade, they don't have a lot of wiggle room, and they just really need to have it planned out very well. Because especially if the cruise ship needs to leave, it's going to leave port, after like it's 3 months or whatever of its downtime while they upgrade the machinery and stuff. So you got to get it done in that 3 months.
One thing that I think that is very nice about these alerts is like it's possible the admin prevent problems, like when you upgrade the cluster, right? So if I have a lot of operator installed, no matter if it's from the partners, I can go there and check if the version installed is using the deprecated APIs. Because if he's using and I upgrade the cluster for 4.9, it will not work, right? So it's a very nice point. It's a very nice feature to help the admins check that, right?
Yeah, and our EUS cadence does just happen to roughly match the upstream API deprecation periods. So if you think about if it's 4 releases upstream and we're going to go to 3 releases a year, we actually have more overlap there. And in some cases, we don't plan on extending our own support for things that have been deprecated upstream, but we have done that for certain situations. And so the main point is we've got your back, especially on those types of special scenarios where you do need just to make sure that upgrade goes really well. We want it to go really well for you.
Exactly. No, don't be sorry, Kamilla. You're fine.
Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning of the show, the engineers are here.
Yeah, someone say, "Where came that voice?" It's me. Sorry, folks. My voice is terrible.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I think it's more the people can't see you, and then all of a sudden you appeared. So
Yeah. I was hearing thunder here, so.
Oh, oof, okay.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those days here in Raleigh.
It's just going to be rainy here.
I'm too ugly, so I try to not appear very shame person. So just engineered, in the dungeon. So
Fair enough. All right. So
I was about to switch back to the slides really quick because I realized there was one thing I didn't talk about, which is we mentioned some of the auto conversion that the platform does, but also if you use our Lifecycle Manager, if you're an operator author, you can do some auto conversion of specifically these two APIs, the validating and mutating webhooks. Because we use those as part of our SDK, we have a smooth upgrade path for you. So there's an SDK command that you can use to do that. And basically, I kind of mentioned this before, you just get this for free because this is how we do our some of our TLS management. Just as part of the platform is, we have to secure your webhooks, and so we want to move them forward in the APIs as well. So another reason to use the Lifecycle Manager, which is built into OpenShift. This is when you go click, install MongoDB. This is what you're doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, we had a stream on OLM not too long ago as well. So
cool.
I will find that as well.
Yeah, you have we each have different things up, which works out well.
Yes,
but I don't have the list of. So I'm just kind of reviewing the set of things that I had kind of pre-staged or the different questions that I had thought about coming into this. I think the only question that I have at the moment is, what's the best way to be informed of future API deprecations?
That is a good question. I would say, we talked about the alerts and stuff, but that's a little bit like kind of reactive. And so to be proactive, it's really look at what the upstream is doing. And, we'll talk about this stuff on the OpenShift blog as well. And, we're obviously tracking that stuff very closely, but I think that's where you're going to start to see, if you really want to be really bleeding edge, like the change about pod security policies and its deprecation was talked about inside of the working group long before it actually became an official policy. So if you want to really get ahead of stuff, getting involved in efforts like that is how you do it.
Yeah, I would recommend folks like subscribe to the changelog somehow, right? Like there's an RSS feed there. The release notes on the docs, as Kamilla just mentioned, is also a good place. And also that deprecation guide that lists versions for each Kubernetes release. So yeah,
nobody reads the release notes. Actually,
I know
that is very important.
Notes, but me, it feels like sometimes it's like
Actually, that brings up an important point. So a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. So first, going back to the very beginning when we were talking about update edges. So it's a little known fact that we actually publish the blocked update edges as errata. So let me share my browser real quick here. That guy. And if I go to, I'm just going to search here because I don't remember the URL off the top of my head. But if we go here and search for OpenShift, I want Red Hat OpenShift Container Platform. You can see in the synopsis here, it'll tell you about all of these. I got to scroll back and find one. But in this errata, it will tell you when there are blocked update edges.
Right.
I should just search at this point. But
There's
anyways.
48Z upgrade to 4859.
There you go.
There we go. Blocked upgrade. Yeah. So if you watch these errata, it will tell you when the edges get blocked. And it will tell you exactly why they're blocked and all that other stuff. I know historically, for anybody who's watched the stream before, I tend to use the Cincinnati graph data repo, which is kind of low in the weeds, if you will. This is the kind of official way that they publish those. So you may want to subscribe to those if you don't already. I think as employees, we get subscribed to all of the alerts all of the time. So they get routed to dev null for me. But So this is a great way to keep updated with what's going on there. And then they do eventually, many of these make their way into the release notes. So if we go back to the docs here and release notes, and then you got to come like all the way down to the bottom. You can see all the way down here, it talks about all of the things that have been going on inside of there. So to Kamilla's point, the release notes are a phenomenal way to understand what's going on. Like you can see here, I think we might have talked about this on stream. I don't remember, but like the minimum storage requirement decreased from 120 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes.
And avoid a lot of things, right? It's better check the document before go there and upgrade and see the things like, and come on, surprise.
Yeah. And so we talk about deprecations that are of kind of the non-API variety. Like we're talking about API contracts here, but like even when like certain features or technologies, we don't see a future for them in OpenShift, we will tell you that ahead of time so that you can plan accordingly. And there's a whole section for that as well as then all of our tech previews and other things for what's new and what do you want to try out. All of that is in here.
Yeah, so I did just to illustrate that in the release notes, there's this deprecated and remove features, and you can see like there's this very nice table that shows you all of the deprecated features when they'll be like cluster loader. We can see is GA deprecated, which means that at some point it will be removed. So yeah, release notes.
To use.
Yeah, release notes they're long and boring, and oftentimes they're great just before bedtime reading. But there's a ton of great information inside of there.
And I'll mention that the V1 Beta 1 CRDs is actually in there, and you can see it's been deprecated. This is one of the APIs we just talked about. It's been deprecated since 4.6, so a few rows up there's a lot of
there's
APIs.
Docker Registry V1, V1 Beta 1 CRDs. Yeah, there's a few of them in here. Jumping back to today's topic, Rob, do you happen to know if there is insights rules for API deprecations?
I believe there are. I don't know if they're gonna wait to go live until like you really, really need to do something about it. Like I don't know how much buffer room we give you there, so I don't know if they're live right now, but they do exist and may either go live if they're not closer to the 4.9 release.
Okay, we should ask John Spinks about that, Chris.
Yeah, we should.
Just catching up on chat here, so I see, and apologies for butchering any names, Perkinji asking about using Submariner. So if you are deploying, or if you're using ACM, Advanced Cluster Manager, and you have your clusters connected into that, you create a cluster pool and you click the button that says deploy Submariner and it does it all for you. It's super neat. And thank you, rhope9, for linking the documentation there.
Chat, I think I can take this one. Can you explain what deprecation actually means? It means at a point in the future, this feature will go away. And that feature could be, right, like the beta version of the API being bumped up to stable, or like an alpha version just not getting adoption and fading out. That's kind of how that works.
Yeah.
The official Kubernetes definition of deprecation, I can look that up, but I mean that's the layman's term stuff.
Yeah, and it's kind of communicating an intent in the future. So you're saying,
right,
this is deprecated now, so probably don't invest in it or upgrade whatever, and then it will be removed at some point. And so the reason we're here today is because we've reached that point. This stuff is actually getting removed.
Right. How often? It seems like 1.22 is kind of a big mark for this. Like, how often do they actually get removed?
It's like, in general, it's not very often, right? Like, I think everything just came to a head in this release because of all the, going to stable things. And
yeah, I think there was like if these things either don't progress to stable by X time period, they need to be removed, or just dropping a bunch of cruft, which I think is mostly what this is like, look, these things have been in here for years at this point. Like, let's just finally get rid of them. But on that, one of the links that you posted about the removals, as you can see the things that are deprecated and the versions that they're going to be removed. So I think there's some other stuff coming up in 1.24 that will get removed. So yeah, but I think it's really only 3 kind of major releases that they have removed a ton of stuff. Most of it happened in this one.
I mean, normally it's like this gradual
There have been
process.
an API removed in 1.16, and there will be also in a 1.22 version of Kubernetes and 1.25.
Yeah, the release team is always good. The Kubernetes release team, as well as ours, is always good at saying, hey, it's going to be deprecated in this release. So you can actually like almost put a calendar entry in and say, like, if it's not fixed by then, problems, right?
I think one thing nice is like to admins, right? They let them know is like if they have a lot of operators installed in the cluster running, everything is working now. But if they upgrade for 4.9, for example, where these APIs doesn't exist anymore, and they have operators versions installed that are using these APIs, then these operators will not work. The important thing is that you need to ensure that all versions installed are compatible with the next version of the OpenShift before the upgrade to avoid the pain and the many hours of work afterwards to, try to solve the problems.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah. So Christian brought up a good point in chat, which is, an API being deprecated does not mean that the feature is being removed. And going back to that page or that chart that I was just showing, we do show when features are deprecated and eventually removed as well. But the API being deprecated just means that you, particularly, assuming the feature isn't also being removed, just the API being deprecated usually means that you need to just move to the new version.
Right.
Which isn't always hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually when something is really widely used, like the CRDs, it's just
Yeah.
a formality.
It's literally a one-line change often. Yeah.
Well, we are at the top of the hour. I know we don't have a hard stop today, so folks, if you have any other questions, anything that you want to ask us, please feel free to get those in via chat. Thank you, Rob. Really appreciate you coming on. Thank you for all of the great information today. I know this is always a great stream when I learn something, which happens pretty much every time. So they're always great in my mind.
Nice.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Yes.
So thank you to Kamilla and thank you to Frederick. I appreciate you both joining very much. I know that we this one came together a little bit last minute, and you all were phenomenal in being flexible and accommodating. So thank you so much.
We
Really
really appreciate.
Really thank you for having us here. That was really amazing. I really like it. I learned too much today. It was really cool.
Yeah.
So for our audience, please don't hesitate to reach out at any point in time if you have any questions about today's topic, if you have any questions about really anything else related to OpenShift and using OpenShift. So you're welcome to contact me on social media at Practical Andrew. I'll throw Chris under the bus at Chris Short on Twitter. You can also reach us via email. We posted our email addresses in chat, but just to reiterate, I am andrew.sullivan@redhat.com and Chris is short@redhat.com. If we can't find the answers, we are always happy to track down and harass the right people. So don't be afraid to ask us about anything and everything. And with that being said, we will see you in 2 weeks. Remember, next week is Ansible Fest.
Yes.
So be sure to join those. Again, sign up for brain dates if you want to have one-on-one with SMEs around many things, not just OpenShift, around Ansible.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Instance. I will attend. Thank you, folks.
Yeah.
Stay safe out there, folks. We'll see you soon.